Hello everyone, this is Gene and I'm back with another video. So first of all, again, thank you all so much. I've really seen a subscriber uptick. In fact, I think it's, at least last I checked, it's around 220 now. So thank you all so much. I'm so happy that the channel is growing and you guys really seem to like the content. The Turning Japanese Gotham High video has like over, 1,000 views now? Which for me is big because I never get that many views typically. I think the last video I did that got that many views was when I did a video reacting and responding to Jax's MK11 ending. So thank you all again so much for the interaction and for, subscribing. It means that I'm doing something right and the audience is growing. So again, to everyone who's new, I hope you continue to enjoy the content. To everyone who's been here for a while now, I hope you continue to enjoy the content. So this is going to be about Gotham High again, but in a broader sense, because something I've noticed on a few comment sections of other people's videos, many people naturally are covering Gotham High. I apologize for the city noises. You would think that with New York City effectively shut down, it would be quiet, but it's not. We're a noisy lot. We're New Yorkers. We just don't know how to not be noticed. You must acknowledge us. Or we will make, very loud noises. We have an ego problem in that respect, but seriously. Going back to my original point, right, a lot of people naturally are making videos about Gotham High and they're venting about it and they're ranting about it. But something I've been seeing in comment sections is some people who are, I guess, trying to defend it, or maybe perhaps it's a bit of a case of sympathy for the devil by saying that, well, it's an Elseworlds story. You should expect that some things are going to change. Here's my response to that. I understand where that's coming from. Indeed, an Elseworlds story allows the writer, allows the creator to explore stories that they can't tell in the regular established canon, right? Whether it's Elseworlds or if we're talking Marvel, it's What If or the Ultimate Universe. But in my opinion, Elseworlds or Ultimates, whatever you want to call it, right? An alternate universe does not mean carte blanche. It doesn't mean that you can just, go whole hog and go to town and just disregard everything, because for better or worse, you're still dealing with established characters who do have a history, right? You're not dealing with new characters who are unknown, whose origin stories and whose characteristics aren't set yet. You're still dealing with established characters, and for better or worse, even if you're telling an Elseworld story, right? People are still going to compare your take on the character with the regular, traditional, well-known version of the character. Now again, as I said in the video about Melissa de la Cruz's hubris, right? I used the example of Superman Red Son. To tell that story, you have to change Superman's origin, because the question of that story is Superman still Superman if he's if he lands and if he's raised in the Soviet Union? So naturally, you have to have his ship land in the Soviet Union, in this case in the Ukraine, as opposed to Kansas, because Soviet Russia and the United States are totally different in every way, right? Different culture, different government structure, different economic structure, different views on what is freedom, everything, right? So he has to grow up in an entirely different culture to explore this story of, is he still Superman? Is he still the character we know? If those circumstances are different, there's where making the change makes sense. But to change things arbitrarily that serve no purpose to the story, in my opinion, is just, as I said in the video, hubris, and it is vanity And that's just not going to work from a storytelling perspective, right? I can understand changing Bruce if you're actually going to address issues in Hong Kong, right? With the protest and everything going on there, and the police state, perhaps in that instance, having a Chinese Bruce Wayne who's from Hong Kong and maybe is even in Hong Kong, right? Is actually in the thick of it, would make more sense. But in this case, it's just because, oh, she thinks that it'll be more real and more modern if he's part Chinese because she's part Chinese and she wants to do this whole thing where it's a blend of Batman, Gossip Girl, and Crazy Rich Asians. It shows a stunning disrespect for the characters and for the lore that has existed for 80 some years at this point, a little over 80 years at this point in time. I think last year was the 80-year anniversary of Batman, if I remember correctly. So 81 years. Now I want to be clear. I'm not saying that you need to be super beholden to an origin story in an Elseworlds story, right? Because at times you may have to change it. But there's just certain elements of a character that should always be respected. For example, do you need to write an Elseworlds story where Bruce's parents always die? No. But if his parents aren't going to die, then you need to explain, okay, how does he become who he is, right? Or explore the idea of I should say, okay, if Bruce Wayne had grown up having a normal normal, cushy, privileged life, would he have still become Batman? Right? Those are the sort of questions and stories I would like to see. And here's the thing. There are Batman Elseworlds stories that were so good they became part of the regular canon. The most famous version of this, naturally, is Killing Joke. It was originally an Elseworlds story. But here's the thing. Killing Joke had a purpose, right? It's a very intense book. It's very graphic, very violent. But it had a purpose. It was asking the question, is Bruce Wayne, is Batman just as bad as the Joker? Are we just as bad as the Joker? Right? This is the question the Joker poses. And what he believes is that all it takes is one bad day to take anyone, whether it's Bruce Wayne, whether it's Commissioner Gordon, doesn't matter who they are. All it takes is one bad day and you'll be just like him. That's what he's trying to prove, right? And given the ambiguous ending of Killing Joke, right? Some believe Bruce choked Joker to death. Some believe that he didn't. I will admit I am one of the ones who thinks that in that story proper, if you just keep it as an Elseworlds story, yeah, I think that Bruce probably at least started choking him. I think that. But here's the thing, the official story, now that it's part of the Batman mythos, is that Bruce didn't kill him, right? But here's the thing. That story was so good and was so true to the characters that it eventually became part of the canon, right? Because it still stuck with the certain truths of the character, right? That Joker is chaotic and that he wants to break Batman's spirit and prove that you're just like me. You're no better than I am. All it takes is one bad day and you'll be just like me. And of course, Batman has to stand on the opposite side I should say, and have his morals tested, right? So he has to go through this horrific thing, which means Barbara has to go through this horrific thing. We see Joker effectively mentally torture, 3 people, all in a desperate attempt to basically affirm his own existence, right? So that makes a good Elseworlds story. Now, am I saying every Elseworlds story needs to be as dark as Killing Joke? No, but it's a good example of what I mean. The characters are still in character, even though it was originally a story that you couldn't tackle in the main canon at the time, hence why it was originally an Elseworlds tale, right? When I think of, how do I put it? Let me use an example. There was an episode of Justice League Unlimited, I think, several years ago. There was an episode where, like, I think it's Superman, Wonder Woman, Bruce, and John Stewart, Green Lantern. They encounter some monster or something, right? And they all four heroes and the monster get morphed into little kids, right? Now, what I like about this episode, aside from the fact that it's silly, it has a lot of hijinks, is that although they get turned into little kids, so in a sense it's an Elseworld story, given that we typically don't see a lot of stories with these heroes as, little, like, not even teenagers, like really minors, right? They were still in character, right? Now their personalities were different because they were kids, but they were still in character, right? Wonder Woman was still very take charge, and she was still very motherly. John Stewart was still, very firm. Bruce was totally a tsundere, right? Standoffish and aloof and all that stuff. Superman was, adorably clueless and innocent, right? Even though this was very different than the typical adult versions that we're used to, it still stuck to certain truths about the character. So they still felt in character, even though at this moment it was telling a very different story. And it was a very funny and good episode, in my opinion. And I think that's what makes a good alternate universe story, when you can still have the character feel like the character, but still be different enough to explore this idea that is so radical that you can't tell it in the main canon, right? So there's that. And I think the problem that even a good writer can run into is that they tend to believe that alternate universe story, whether it's Elseworlds or Ultimates or whatever it is, means carte blanche, means I can do anything I want. No, it doesn't. It gives you a little more creative freedom because you are not as beholden to certain elements in canon or lore, but it does not mean that you can just do whatever you want. Because if you do whatever you want, not only do you show a lack of restraint and, in my opinion, forethought, you show disrespect to the characters and ultimately to the reader. And when you do that, you get Gotham High. And when you do that, you get all these downvotes. And when you do that, DC turns off the comment section for the video. Did you think I didn't know about that, DC? Really? At least Marvel left theirs open on the new Warriors video. Come on, Jim Lee, come on. But anyway, right? And when you don't show restraint or care for the characters, what happens is that you end up being, whether intentionally or unintentionally, offensive in many ways. Let me give you an example that I don't think a lot of people have touched upon in Gotham High in particular, right? Many people have ranted and raved about Batman being part Chinese. People have ranted about, gay Chinese. Uncle Alfred, but not too many people have mentioned Dick Grayson. Even I didn't mention him initially because I legit didn't know he was there. Now, let me explain. There's this scene in the preview pages of the Gotham High book where you see a pudgy black kid, right? Black, nerdy, pudgy kid being picked on by two preppy white boys, and one wearing a trucker hat like it's 2004. I don't know why. It's a very dated reference, and I'm saying that given how dated I am. But anyway, he gets picked on. He gets beat up. He doesn't fight back in the least. And then Bruce comes in, saves him, gives him the card with the elements on it, which I still maintain is a reference to A Book of Five Rings. Some people have challenged me on that. To those people, with all due respect to your opinion, prove me wrong. Okay, the Chinese elements involve like wood and stuff. The Chinese classical elements. The elements in A Book of Five Rings are the exact elements listed on that card. The only thing missing is the void. So if you're gonna challenge me on that, I accept it, but prove me wrong. Disagreeing with me on the matter does not mean I'm wrong. It simply means that you don't agree. It's not the same. Actually, prove me wrong on that. There's a person who has, I think it's AL, who has said they are said they are Chinese in the comments section. So I would imagine that if I was wrong, AL would have told me. But I'm just saying. So if I am wrong on that, I will gladly state I am wrong and make a retraction. But tell me, show me definitively where I am wrong, because that card's either a reference to a samurai swordsman book or Avatar the Last Airbender. It's one or the other. It's certainly not a reference to anything definitively Chinese or from Hong Kong. Now, all that being said, rant's over. All that being said, my problem with this depiction of Dick Grayson is the fact that he's black. Right? I think it's a silly, arbitrary race lift. And every character is getting that except for the Joker, Jack Napier, and we all know why. But my problem with this take on the character, at least as so far as we see it and we know it, is that he's being depicted, at least in my opinion, as a weak black man, as a helpless, defenseless black man. You don't do that. You don't do that. Okay, I grew up in a predominantly black culture, despite my own biracial identity. The culture I grew up in is the inner city African American community, right? So I've been around a lot of black men, whether they were friends of mine or people I've worked with or members of my family, all of my life. Okay, one of the biggest, what's the word I'm looking for? One of the biggest, I guess, most popular forms of music when I was growing up, right, was rap. In particular, gangster rap, right? That came of age in the late 80s and the early 90s and pretty much dominated the 1990s well into the 2000s. Black men in particular are very invested in coming across as strong, as looking strong, right? They don't want to be seen as weak. They don't want to be depicted as weak. Just because Steve Urkel was a nerd does not mean that he was representative of the whole black community. Think of famous black actors like Will Smith or Sam Jackson or Lawrence Fishburne or many others. Have you ever seen them play a weak role? Have you ever seen them play a role where they're playing a weak person who is defenseless and can't help themselves? No. And I doubt you ever will. And things like being feminized, right? And things like being seen as weak or effeminate are actually quite hot button topics in the black community. You can look up black male YouTubers who talk about this, who don't like the fact, for example, there are black comedians like Martin Lawrence and I think Chris Rock and a few others who have, or what's his name, Tyler Perry, right, who have done cross-dressing or, basically drag, right, have, played female characters in roles and have been, the man in a dress. A lot of them find that offensive. Why? Because they feel like it's an emasculation of black men, and they feel that it's Hollywood indoctrination and all these other things. But this is a hot button topic in the black male community. In fact, I think it was it's the gospel according to Mark with a C. I'll link his video. There was a video he did recently where he briefly explains why black people, or black men rather, often have these sometimes edgy or aggressive nicknames, and he explains that it's a defense mechanism because a lot of black men grow up in the inner city neighborhood, and they adopt these names and these personas to come across as strong, because you can't be weak if you're growing up in the inner city, because if you're weak, you're vulnerable, and if you're vulnerable, you're a target, right? So for me, having known many black men and having grown up in the inner city black culture, seeing this version of Dick Grayson, who's out of shape, who, again, is the pudgy, out of shape, nerd. And on top of that, he doesn't even fight back. Now, do I think that Melissa De La Cruz meant any harm by that? I don't think so. I'd like to believe that she didn't, but she certainly, in my opinion, showed a lack of understanding for how this character might be perceived by people in the black community, in particular by black men. Black men are obsessed with looking strong. Why do you think they love anime like DBZ? Because it's all about getting strong, stronger. That is something that resonates very strongly with a lot of young black men, for better or worse. But you can look at any, I would say, black-dominated media, right? Gangster rap, soul, whatever it is. You're gonna see these very what's the word I'm looking for? I guess alpha or macho depictions of being a man. I'm not trying to say that it's always right or that it's always healthy, but that is the way it is. In black culture, men have to come across as strong. I'm not saying it's perfect, but that's the way it is. So when you see in media, especially media not made by a black person, right? A black kid coming across as weak and being picked on and not even fighting back, you're going to offend some people. Now, do I think a lot of black men are going to be reading this comic? Probably not. But the few that might, I don't think this version of Dick Grayson is going to go over well with them. I'm just saying. In my opinion, what she could have done if she wanted to modernize Dick Grayson was modernize him, but still stick to certain truths about him. For example, instead of him being, chubby and a nerd, make him fit, right? Have him be the school's top gymnast, right? Now, gymnastics is very different than being an acrobat, but acrobatics are not something that's exactly well known or popular anymore, right? Circuses are no longer around, at least not in America. So it would be taking something that has sort of become dated and modernizing it with its modern equivalent, gymnastics. People understand gymnasts. There are many famous, well-known gymnasts in the media. People understand that gymnastics has long been a part of Dick Grayson's physical depiction and his characterization, practicing rings and gymnastics and all that. So it would still be changing the character a little bit. But what's the word I'm looking for? but also modernizing it, right? Because now he's a gymnast instead of the son of acrobats, right? You could do that. You could have him be handsome instead of being a pudgy nerd, right? Because we all know that Dick Grayson likes the ladies, and the ladies like Dick Grayson. Right? You can still keep those elements of the character and make him recognizable and still get away with things like arbitrarily race lifting him or having him get jumped by two skinny white dudes. If you still hold to certain essential elements of the character of Dick Grayson. And one of the most essential elements of Dick Grayson is Dick Grayson ain't no punk. Right? So I think that had she put a little more forethought into it and had tried to stick to the core elements of the characters instead of just making these arbitrary changes, race lift into race lift and all this other stuff, that while this story would not have gone over well, because again, there's no audience here for it, and I said that in a few videos now, at least people would have felt, you know what, okay, she's trying to tell a different story, and maybe it's not my type of story, but at least she's showing respect toward the characters. Sadly, that's not the response here. And we're seeing that with not just the comic critics channel and the social commentary channels like myself and Nerded and whatnot, and the Tanner twins and Heel versus Babyface making videos about this. People are also voicing their dissent and their discontent by downvoting the video. Many more people have downvoted that video than people who have made videos about it. This is not what the fans want. And sadly, DC, Jim Lee, because you're the head now, Jim, you're up there on your own, you're the king, continues to allow people who are from outside the comic industry to come in and to not have to prove themselves and prove that they can tell a story for comic book readers. So you just give them carte blanche to just do whatever they want, and then when people either, like myself, make videos and voice their discontent, or you have the silent majority who downvote the video, what happens? Turn off comments. Ignoring what people are saying, ignoring the criticism, is just going to make the work worse. And you wonder why the comics industry is collapsing around you. This is why. Because of the blatant disrespect to the characters, to the fans, because of the lack of standards, and no one being even made to maintain standards or be held to standards. Right? It's just, this is just what happens when you let the inmates run the asylum. This is what you get. It's a sad situation, but the fans didn't cause it. The creators did. So they have nobody but themselves to blame in the end. Again, I didn't make Gotham High. I didn't ask for Gotham High. DC allowed this woman to tell her own YA fantasy in a graphic novel featuring Batman characters. That's fan fiction, and it should have stayed on fanfiction.net. But anyway, that's the video. Please let me know what you think, and I will see you all in the next one. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.